I think before diving into verbs and how they function in Latin, one of the beneficial things that we could probably do is talk about how verbs work in English, simply because I think that for the most part, we don't really teach grammar anymore in English classes. So when I'm saying some of these things, maybe you'll be a little confused. Maybe I'm assuming that you're going to know something that you don't know. So it might be helpful just to cover this as how it looks in English, really go a little deeper into it, and touch on some things that you're going to see again. You'll see all of this stuff again in the notes in the video for chapter 1, but let's expand upon it a little bit more. So simply, verbs are just action words. So an action word, or they can express state of being. Okay, and I'll show you what that means here in a second. But state of being. Okay, so what do these look like in English? Some verbs you might have are to run, right? To help, to see, or to be. And to be is one of those that's showing a state of being, right? To be cold, to be hot, to be sad, to be happy, anything like that. That's showing a state of being, just how you are or how someone else is, right? But all these other ones are actions, right? You can see things, you can run, you can go and help someone. That's an act. Those are all actions. But state of being might be something that you might not really get. Now, what all of these are in English, and this is touched on again in the other video, are what are called infinitives. There we go. Infinitives. And all that means is that there's no subject with them. There's no subject. To run. Well, who's doing the running, right, is the question. To help. Who's doing the helping? To see. Who is existing here? Who is being with to be? An infinitive is not like infinity, like going on forever and ever and ever. It actually means not defined. And what this means is that in English, we can't really tell who's doing it, right? We need to know what action is going on and who's doing that action. So if we look, one of the things that we need in English is that we need something to go along with these. And what we need are called subject pronouns in order to get that meaning. Subject pronouns being pretty important here. And all the subject pronoun expresses is, who or what, because it could be a thing as well, who or what is doing the action. All right? So who's running? Who's helping? Who's existing there, right? That sounds very philosophical, but, or who is seeing, right? And that subject pronoun is going to tell us that in English. And now, the way that these work is we have, here they are listed out. These are our general ways of being able to say, who is doing something. We have I, you, he, she, or it, we, you, and they. Okay? And then we would add our verb to that in order to sort of get our meaning. And the biggest thing that we're going to talk about right now is the idea of person, and even in this first chapter, and also number as well. And all that this is we're going to have a singular chart and we're going to have a plural chart. So number there is the idea of either singular or plural. Okay, so we have number, and then we have person. And person, we can either have first person, second person, or third person. And this is just in relation to whoever is speaking. So if I am doing the speaking, and I'm talking about myself, as I am right now, then we would use I. I'm talking in the first person, right? But if I am speaking, and I'm saying that you are watching the video, well, then it goes to you, right? And that's second person, because I, the first person, is talking about you directly, someone directly in that conversation. And then third person is if I am speaking and talking to someone that's not you, but someone else outside of the conversation entirely. He, she, or it, right? These are the general ways that we can refer to people and subjects and who's doing the action. Now, the important thing to know is that for third person, it could be he, she, or it, or any noun, right? And this is the idea of talking about yourself in the third person. So if I'm speaking, right, but I say Tyler is speaking, because that's my name, then, well, Tyler is a third person noun, but I'm doing the speaking, and that's where that reference of speaking about yourself in the third person comes from. And then plural is just the same exact thing, right? So if I am speaking, or there's a speaker, and that person is involved in a group with multiple people, well, then it goes to this we. It's plural, right? Just because there's more than one. Same thing here. This is you, and this is the idea of, you could have y'all, or Pittsburgh people, yins, right? Something along those lines it's a group of people, and a singular person or a group of people is referring to multiple people in one group directly in a conversation. And then the same thing, they, is used for third person, just like he, she, or it is. And this you can almost say is any nouns or group of nouns, right? That could be used. So we could say the boys went to the store, or it's just simply they went to the store. And there we go. And this is something that we'll see. Latin does this a little bit differently, but we're going to add these subject pronouns to our words in English in order to get our meaning here. And we'll see some examples here. The last thing that I want to talk about before just showing you some examples, well, actually two things, my apologies. The first one of these two things is the idea of tense. And tense is just saying when, when is it happening? When is the action, or when is the verb happening, right? It's giving you, can't talk and write at the same time. When is it happening? Tense essentially comes from the Latin word for time, which is tempus. So tempus. All right, tempus is time there. That's sort of, if you can see the similarities, like the TE and then TE and N, it became an M from a P. There's some similarities. Just trust me on that one. But when is it happening, right? So if we wanted to say something, and for right now, all you need to concern yourself with is the idea of past, present, and then there's future. And why is this important? Well, if we're saying, the dog, and we're talking about a dog running away. Well, did the dog run away? Will it run away? Like some weird prophecy? Or is it running away right now? The dog is running away. You better go catch it. Or the dog ran away. We better go find the dog. The dog's gone. We need to go searching for it. Or the dog will run away, right? You're giving some kind of warning, right? There are a bunch of different past tenses in Latin, as there are in English, but we'll talk about sort of each one individually. We'll get it as they come. And then future tense, there is a future tense in Latin as well as English. But for right now, really, the one that we're going to focus on is present. Okay? But tense. So we're going to talk about tense a lot. And the last thing is something that does come up in this chapter coming up is the idea of an adverb. Okay? So an adverb is a word, and we'll say word that, and we don't want to say describes, even though that's sort of exactly what's happening, but a word that modifies is the thing that we want. It's adding some additional information, a word that modifies a verb. Right, so it's telling us a little bit more information, and that's where some people use describe. The good word, the word that we use a lot in Latin, studying Latin, is modifies. So a word that modifies a verb. And how does this look in English? Well, typically there's going to be an ly at the end. Okay, most of the time. So an example could be something like, I read constantly. That's a mistake. There. I read constantly, right? Well, who's your subject? I is your subject, so here we have our subject. And what is the subject doing? What action is the subject doing? To read. So we have our verb here. right? And then we have this, and what is this modifying, right? What is it? What is constantly here telling us? Is it saying something about I, that I constantly, right? Well, what constantly? Doesn't make sense. But is it saying, it's saying how we read, right? So it's answering the question of, how do you read, or when do you read, right? So it's adding extra information about the action of reading, and it's constantly. And if you see, we have that ly, and this is an adverb. Okay, so there you go. This is what an adverb is going to look like. A lot of times in English, in popular use now, and constantly is a bad example, but we'll actually get rid of this ly, right? So if you said something like, I study, I can't write right now. I study serious, right? Or something along those lines. You hear this a lot, like someone takes it serious, right? And really the idea is I study seriously is actually the right way to say that, right? I think about it serious. Well, no, that's wrong. It's seriously, because it's modifying how you think or study or something like that. So you always see this ly. Okay. Now, just some things to point out here. Let's just go through a couple examples and then be done here. So I read constantly, right? So where we go, we could say something like we eat quickly in the cafeteria. Maybe because we don't give you guys enough time to eat, or simply because you don't like the food. I don't know which one it is. But if we look here, right, what's our action word? What's happening? What's the word right here? And our action word here is eat. Okay, and if you want to say, well, who's doing the eating? Well, we are doing the eating. So we is your subject, right? And in the cafeteria, we don't really have to worry about right now. It's what's called a prepositional phrase. But you should be able to pick out an adverb here, right? It has an ly. And so, quickly, adverb, right? Going on to another example here. So we eat quickly. That's one sentence by itself, right? We eat could be a sentence by itself. And that quickly is just adding extra information there. And hopefully no one does this, but they cheated on the math test. Right? Well, again, we can have a different subject. Look at this in English. We could say we cheated, right? And it would be the same exact word. Cheated wouldn't change. But here we have, they. And they's your subject. And what are they doing, or what did they do? They cheated. So there's your verb. Boom. They cheated. And if you notice, we have we eat, right? We eat. That's happening right now, right? You're in the cafeteria eating quickly. They cheated, right? That's a different tense. That's a different time that it happened. It's not happening right now, right? It happened in the past. So this would be a form of a past tense verb. And this would imply maybe that they got away with it, or they got in trouble, and now they're dealing with the repercussions, right? But they cheated, right? And there's no adverb here. We just have on the math test. And that's not really telling us, how they cheated, or how often, or anything like that. It's not really modifying the verb. It's just adding some extra detail of where they cheated, which isn't an adverb. It has to directly relate to either the amount of time that the verb is happening, or how quickly or how slowly, something like that. And then with just one more here, you and I are best friends. Right? And here again, we do have a state of being now, are, right? It's not an action, but it's actually state of being. This is from your verb to be. So you and I are best friends. Well, who are the best friends? Well, simply you and I. So that's going to be your subject. And really, you could almost even say that the best friends are a subject. And we'll talk more about how this verb works, the verb to be works, in a few chapters. But we'll be covering a lot more about verbs throughout. I hope that this at least helped you clear some things up, maybe about subjects and the verb and what a verb is and the reason why we need subjects in English, or just how we use them, and adverbs, and giving you some ideas of what an adverb is, and that most of the time you're going to see an ly. Okay?